Chapter 4. Sita stood, her hands locked behind her back, her head bowed. Muck and refuse from the Mithila slums all over her clothes. Her face caked with mud. The very expensive ring on her finger missing. Shivering with fear. She had never seen her mother so angry. Sunena was staring at her daughter. No words were spoken. Just a look of utter disapproval. And worse, disappointment. Sita felt like she had failed her mother in the worst possible way. I'm so sorry, Ma, wailed Sita, fresh tears flowing down her face. She wished her mother would at least say something. Or slap her. Or scold her. This silence was terrifying. Ma. Sunena sat in stony silence, staring hard at her daughter. My lady. Sunena looked towards the entrance to her chamber. Policeman was standing there, his head bowed. What is the news? Asked Sunena, brusquely. The 5 boys are missing, my lady, said the policeman. They have probably escaped. All 5. I don't have any new information on the injured boy, my lady, said the policeman, referring to the one hit on the head by Sita. Some witnesses have come forward. They say that he was carried away by the other boys. He was bleeding a lot. A lot. Well, one witness said he would be surprised if that boy, the policeman, wisely, left the words, made it alive, unsaid. Leave us, ordered Sunena. The policeman immediately saluted, turned, and marched out. Sunena turned her attention back to Sita. Her daughter cowered under the stern gaze. The queen then looked beyond Sita, at the filthy adolescent standing near the wall. What is your name, child? Asked Sunena. Samichi, my lady. You are not going back to the slums, Samichi. You will stay in the palace from now on. Samichi smiled and folded her hands together into a namaste. Of course, my lady. It will be my honor to. Samichi stopped speaking as Sunena raised her right hand. The queen turned towards Sita. Go to your chambers. Take a bath. Have the physician look at your wounds, and Samichi's wounds. We will speak tomorrow. Ma. Tomorrow. Sita was standing next to Sunena, who was seated on the ground. Both Sunena and she were outside the private temple room in the queen's chambers. Sunena was engrossed in making a fresh rangoli on the floor, made of powdered colors. It was an ethereal mix of fractals, mathematics, philosophy, and spiritual symbolism. Sunena made a new rangoli early every morning at the entrance of the temple. Within the temple, idols of the main gods who Sunena worshipped had been consecrated: Lord Parshuram, the previous Vishnu; Lord Rudra, the great Mahadev; Lord Brahma, the creator scientist. But the pride of place at the center was reserved for the mother goddess, Shakti Ma. The tradition of mother goddess worship was especially strong in the land of Sunena's father, Assam, a vast, fertile and fabulously rich valley that embraced the upper reaches of the largest river of the Indian subcontinent, Brahmaputra. Sita waited patiently, too scared to talk. There is always a reason why I ask you to do or not do something, Sita, said Sunena, not raising her eyes from the intricate rangoli that was emerging on the floor. Sita sat still, her eyes pinned on her mother's hands. There is an age to discover certain things in life. You need to be ready for it. Finishing the rangoli, Sunena looked at her daughter. Sita relaxed as she saw her mother's eyes. They were full of love. As always, she wasn't angry anymore. There are bad people too, Sita. People who do criminal things. You find them among the rich in the inner city and the poor in the slums. Yes, Ma, Shush, don't talk. Just listen, said Sunena firmly. Sita fell silent. Sunena continued. The criminals among the rich are mostly driven by greed. One can negotiate with greed. But the criminals among the poor are driven by desperation and anger. Desperation can sometimes bring out the best in a human being. That's why the poor can often be noble. But desperation can also bring out the worst. They have nothing to lose. And they get angry when they see others with so much when they have so little. It's understandable. As rulers, our responsibility is to make efforts and change things for the better. But it cannot happen overnight. If we take too much from the rich to help the poor, the rich will rebel. That can cause chaos. And everyone will suffer. So we have to work slowly. We must help the truly poor. That is dharma. But we should not be blind and assume that all poor are noble. Not everyone has the spirit to keep their character strong when their stomachs are empty. Sunena pulled Sita onto her lap. She sat comfortably. For the first time since her foolhardy foray into the slums, she breathed a little easier. You will help me govern Mithila someday, said Sunena. You will need to be mature and pragmatic. You must use your heart to decide the destination, but use your head to plot the journey. People who only listen to their hearts usually fail. On the other hand, people who only use their heads tend to be selfish. Only the heart can make you think of others before yourself. For the sake of dharma, you must aim for equality and balance in society. Perfect equality can never be achieved, but we must try to reduce inequality as much as we can. But don't fall into the trap of stereotypes. Don't assume that the powerful are always bad or that the powerless are always good. There is good and bad in everyone. Sita nodded silently. You need to be liberal, of course. For that is the Indian way. But don't be a blind and stupid liberal. Yes, Ma. And do not willfully put yourself in danger ever again. Sita hugged her mother, as tears flowed out of her eyes. Sunena pulled back and wiped her daughter's tears. You frightened me to death. What would I have done if something bad had happened to you? Sorry, Ma. Sunena smiled as she embraced Sita again. My impulsive little girl. Sita took a deep breath. Guilt had been gnawing away at her. She needed to know. Ma, that boy I hit on the head. What? Sunena interrupted her daughter. Don't worry about that. But, I said don't worry about that. Thank you, Chacha. Sita squealed, as she jumped into her uncle Kushadhwaj's arms. Kushadhwaj, Janak's younger brother and the king of Sankashya, was on a visit to Mithila. He had brought a gift for his niece. A gift that had been a massive hit. It was an Arabian horse. Native Indian breeds were different from the Arab variety. The Indian ones usually had 34 ribs while the Arabian horses often had 36. More importantly, an Arabian horse was much sought after as it was smaller, sleeker, and easier to train. And its endurance level was markedly superior. It was a prized possession. And expensive too. Sita was understandably delighted. Kushadhwaj handed her customized saddle, suitable for her size. Made of leather, it had a gold-plated horn on top of the pommel. The saddle, though small, was still heavy for the young Sita. But she refused the help of the Mithila royal staff in carrying it. Sita dragged the saddle to the private courtyard of the royal chambers, where her young horse waited for her. It was held by one of Kushadhwaj's aides. Sunena smiled. Thank you so much. Sita will be lost in this project for the next few weeks. I don't think she will eat or sleep till she's learned how to ride. She's a good girl, said Kushadhwaj. But it is an expensive gift, Kushadhwaj. She's my only niece, Bhabhi, said Kushadhwaj to his sister-in-law. If I won't spoil her, then who will? Sunena smiled and gestured for them to join Janak in the veranda adjoining the courtyard. The king of Mithila set the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad manuscript aside as his wife and brother joined him. Discreet aides placed some cups filled with buttermilk on the table. They also lit a silver lamp, placed at the center of the table. Just as noiselessly, they withdrew. Kushadhwaj cast a quizzical look at the lamp and frowned. It was daytime, but he remained quiet. Sunena waited till the aides were out of earshot. Then she looked at Janak. But her husband had picked up his manuscript again. Deeply engrossed. After her attempts to meet his eyes remained unsuccessful, she cleared her throat. Janak remained focused on the manuscript in his hands. What is it, Bhabhi? Asked Kushadhwaj. Sunena realized that she had no choice. She would have to be the one to speak up. She pulled a document out of the large pouch tied to her waist and placed it on the table. Kushadhwaj resolutely refused to look at it. Kushadhwaj, we have been discussing the road connecting Sankashya to Mithila for many years now, said Sunena. It was washed away in the Great Flood. But it has been more than 2 decades since. The absence of that road has caused immense hardship to the citizens and traders of Mithila. Single quote. What traders, Bhabhi? Said Kushadhwaj, laughing gently. Are there any in Mithila? Sunena ignored the barb. You had agreed in principle to pay for 2/3 of the cost of the road, if Mithila financed the remaining 1/3. Kushadhwaj remained silent. Mithila has raised its share of the money, said Sunena. She pointed to the document. Let's seal the agreement and let the construction begin. Kushadhwaj smiled. But Bhabhi, I don't see what the problem is. The road is not that bad. People use it every day. I myself took that road to Mithila yesterday. But you are a king, Kushadhwaj, said Sunena pleasantly, her tone studiously polite. You are capable of many things that ordinary people are not. Ordinary people need a good road. Kushadhwaj smiled broadly. Yes, the ordinary people of Mithila are lucky to have a queen as committed to them as you are. Sunena did not say anything. I have an idea, Bhabhi, said Kushadhwaj. Let Mithila begin the construction of the road. Once your share of the 1/3 is done, Sankashya will complete the remaining 2/3. Single quote. All right. Sunena picked up the document and a quill from a side table and scribbled a line at the end. She then pulled out the royal seal from her pouch and marked the agreement. She offered the document to Kushadhwaj. It was then that Kushadhwaj realized the significance of the lamp. Lord Agni, the god of fire, as witness. Every Indian believed that Agni was the great purifier. It was not a coincidence that the first hymn of the first chapter of the holiest Indian scripture, the Rig Veda, celebrated Lord Agni. All promises that were sealed with the god of fire as witness could never be broken. Promises of marriage, of gains, of peace treaties, and even a promise to build roads. Kushadhwaj did not take the agreement from his sister-in-law. Instead, he reached into his pouch and pulled out his own royal seal. I trust you completely, Bhabhi. You can mark my agreement on the document. Sunena took the seal from Kushadhwaj and was about to stamp the agreement, when he softly spoke, It's a new seal, Bhabhi, one that reflects Sankashya properly. Sunena frowned. She turned the seal around and looked at its markings. Even though it was a mirror image of the symbol that would be marked on the agreement, the Queen of Mithila recognized it immediately. It was a single dolphin, the seal symbol of Mithila. Sankashya had historically been a subsidiary kingdom of Mithila, ruled by the younger members of the royal family, and it had a different seal, a single hilsa fish. Sunena stiffened in anger, but she knew that she had to control her temper. She slowly placed the document back on the table. The Sankashya seal had not been used. Why don't you give me your actual seal, Kushadhwaj? Said Sunena. This is my kingdom's seal now, Bhabhi. It can never be so unless Mithila accepts it. No kingdom will recognize this as your seal till Mithila publicly does so. Every sub-Sindhu kingdom knows that the single dolphin is the mark of the Mithila royal family's direct line. True, Bhabhi. But you can change that. You can legitimize the seal across the land by using it on that document. Sunena cast a look at her husband. The king of Mithila raised his head, looked briefly at his wife, and then went back to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This is not acceptable, Kushadhwaj, said Sunena, maintaining her calm expression and voice to hide the anger boiling within. This will not happen for as long as I'm alive. I don't understand why you are getting so agitated, Bhabhi. You have married into the Mithila royal family. I was born into it. The royal blood of Mithila flows in my veins, not yours. Right. Janak Dada. Janak looked up and finally spoke, though the tone was detached and devoid of anger. Kushadhwaj, whatever Sunena says is my decision as well. Kushadhwaj stood up. This is a sad day. Blood has been insulted by blood. For the sake of, Sunena too rose to her feet. Abruptly interrupting Kushadhwaj, though her tone remained unfailingly polite. Be careful what you say next, Kushadhwaj. Kushadhwaj laughed. He stepped forward and took the Sankashya seal from Sunena's hand. This is mine. Sunena remained silent. Don't pretend to be a custodian of the royal traditions of Mithila, scoffed Kushadhwaj. You are not blood family. You are only an import. Sunena was about to say something when she felt a small hand wrap itself around hers. She looked down. The young Sita stood by her side, shaking with fury. In her other hand was the saddle that Kushadhwaj had just gifted her. She threw the saddle at her uncle. It fell on his feet. As Kushadhwaj doubled up in pain, the Sankashya seal fell from his hand. Sita leapt forward, picked up the seal and smashed it to the ground, breaking it in two. The breaking of a royal seal was considered a very bad omen. This was a grievous insult. Sita! Shouted Janak. Kushadhwaj's face contorted with fury. This is an outrage, Dada. Sita now stood in front of her mother. She faced her uncle, daring him with her eyes. Spreading her arms out to cover her mother protectively. The king of Sankashya picked up the broken pieces of his royal seal and stormed out. You have not heard the last of this, Dada. As he left, Sunena went down on her knees and turned Sita around. You should not have done that, Sita. Sita looked at her mother with smoldering eyes. Then turned to look at her father, defiant and accusing. There was not a trace of apology on her face. You should not have done that, Sita. Sita held on to her mother, refusing to let go. She wept with wordless anguish. A smiling Janak came up to her and patted her head. The royal family had gathered in the king's private office. A few weeks had passed since the incident with Kushadhwaj. Sita, her parents had decided, was old enough to leave for Gurukul, literally, the Guru's family, but in effect a residential school. Janak and Sunena had chosen Rishi Shvetaketu's Gurukul for their daughter. Shvetaketu was the uncle of Janak's chief guru, Ashtavakra. His Gurukul offered lessons in the core subjects of philosophy, mathematics, science, and Sanskrit. Sita would also receive education in other specialized subjects like geography, history, economics, and royal administration, among others. One subject that Sunena had insisted Sita be taught, overriding Janak's objections, was warfare and martial arts. Janak believed in non-violence. Sunena believed in being practical. Sita knew that she had to go. But she was a child. And the child was terrified of leaving home. You will come home regularly, my dear, said Janak. And we will come and see you too. The ashram is on the banks of the Ganga river. It's not too far. Sita tightened her grip on her mother. Sunena prized Sita's arms and held her chin. She made her daughter look at her. You will do well there. It will prepare you for your life. I know that. Are you sending me away because of what I did with Chacha? Sobbed Sita. Sunena and Janak immediately went down on their knees and held her close. Of course not, my darling, said Sunena. This has nothing to do with your uncle. You have to study. You must get educated so that you can help run this kingdom someday. Yes, Sita, said Janak. Your mother is right. What happened with Kushadhwaj uncle has nothing to do with you. It is between him and your mother and I. Sita burst into a fresh bout of tears. She clung to her parents like she'd never let them go.